Hello, everybody, and welcome to Table Takes. I am your new host for the day, Marcus Mace, and I am joined by some of the absolute coolest people I have ever met. So why don't we hop into this and say hi to them? How you guys doing, everybody?
Hi.
Oh, doing good. Great.
Bonsai,
Fantastic.
that sounds like you volunteered to be the first person I single out. So Bonsai, let me ask you a question. How's your day going? How's your week? How's it been?
It's been good. I'm trying to find life balance now that I have a spawn that I take care of.
A little
Uh,
thing, yeah.
yeah, little thing. Now I just realized that I just don't have energy for anything else, and all my life rotates around the little thing and making sure it doesn't die or try to drown itself or try to eat poison. All those things. But I did get some things. I went to the recycling place and got rid of a lot of my e-waste, and then went to Goodwill, dropped off all that, and surprisingly went to half price books, dropped off all of my old DVDs and stuff in my I accumulated and got $37, which is actually really good if you ever tried giving stuff to half price books.
Yeah.
Okay. All
It's
right.
what did you now let me ask you a question. When you were at half price books, did you after that you got that 37, did you use that to buy anything cool or special?
So I really only came back with $7 because then I got books because
Yes.
that's what they do at half price. They even have board games there. If you guys didn't know, half price books also sells board games as well as like they have a whole section for RPGs.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So you can trade your books in to get more books
I love that.
if you want.
That is really cool. Bonsai, thank you so much for that update. Now I'm gonna bug Javion. Javion, what have you been up to this week?
Have you guys ever heard of this weird show called One Piece? I feel like nobody's talking about it. I feel
Javion?
like it. Listen, let me actually explain the show before you check out. It's weird, but in like a fun way. There's like these pirates, and they're like searching for this treasure. I started
Javion.
watching. I started watching it for the first time. I think I protested it all my life because my brother was into it,
Mm,
and this at that point is I can't watch it. I
yeah.
can't watch that. But no, now that I haven't talked to him in 10 years, it's time to start
Oh,
watching
finally,
things
yeah.
that I denied myself. So yeah, what's up with this Usopp guy? Does he get better in like future seasons or something? Because truly, what a heinous idea, not only for like a character, but also a character arc. Because I'm not seeing one at all. I'm just seeing a guy I don't like be on screen for too long.
I will warn you, now that you're in the Usopp section, you are probably 30, 40 episodes into One Piece, and you're asking for character development on a 1,000+ episode show. You're gonna have to wait at least 400 episodes for some hard development.
Yeah,
Really?
I mean,
you got
it's
like
good development, but it's like there's it takes a while. I have never watched a show this long before this many episodes, so I am fascinated by this, and I know someone. We're gonna have a talk at Gen Con this year. We're gonna have a whole One Piece conversation in that production room. But
I should take some advice from Interface. They're saying don't watch it. It's a trap.
yeah, interface is correct because you will never get out of it. And speaking of never getting out of things, this is not a good segue. And I'm gonna not good segue into Noir. How are you doing?
Well, it looks like I can't get out of this segue. So that I can get
Hell
out
yeah.
of it. Yeah. My week has been a week.
Mm.
I'm very excited. We got a new shelving unit for the bathroom, so like things are like organized in there, which is nice. I got some
Nice.
barbicide for my razors, which is that blue liquid that you see in
Mhm.
barbershops. I didn't know how potent and powerful that stuff is. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
they say if you ingest any of it or if any of it gets into your skin, call for help immediately. So
Yeah, it's mega poison. It's mega poison.
it's super duper. It kills everything. That's why doctors and barbers use it to clean the stuff. Other than that, yeah, I've just kind of been vibing. I got a car mount for my phone,
Nice.
so that's cool.
Awesome. I always love this is one of my favorite parts of the show where we get to catch up and see what the hosts are doing. For me, what I've done is pretty much just Gen Con related stuff because we are coming up to Gen Con August 3rd through 6th in Indianapolis. It's going to be awesome. We are all going to be there. If you see us, we're going to be very busy, but please wave your hands. Please say hi. We love to see you. And speaking of something coming up at Gen Con, this today we have a very special interview about diplomacy. Now, diplomacy has been a feature of Gen Con since its release in 1959. Peter Atkinson will sit down with Thomas Haver to talk about the rich history of diplomacy at Gen Con. That's going to be an interview we have coming up in a little bit today, so stick around. We are really happy to have the Renegade and the diplomacy people here with us. We are also going to be joined by the Girl by Moonlight team to talk about that fantastic game. So it's pretty exciting. But right now, we have to hop into our headlines. Javion, do you want to take this headline away for us?
You got it.
Thank you.
Folks, we are big fans of Coyote and Crow here. And this announcement comes to us from Dicebreaker, who are also big fans of here. Thank you to Chase Carter for this article. Coyote and Crow Maker's new semi-cooperative board game only has a winner if nobody loses. What does that mean? So if you are a fan of gift giving or getting gifts like I am, then you're going to be a big fan of this game. It is a semi-cooperative board game inspired by indigenous gift giving traditions, which just sounds amazing. I love it already. Wolves, which is now crowdfunding on Kickstarter, if you want to check out the link in chat, only crowns a winner if every player survives the harsh winter together. So you do have to work together a little bit, even though you're kind of competing. But if anybody falls behind, then everybody loses. It's the first board game from Connor Alexander at Coyote and Crow Games. And it's also their first title that isn't set in the post-apocalyptic world that's imagined around indigenous culture, in the indigenous culture focused sci-fi RPG. So in this game that's played with 3 to 6 players, you take on the role of community leaders cooperating amongst themselves to prepare for the coming winter. The seasons of 1 year play out over 8 simultaneous turns, with each player making decisions for their own people while also gaining social standing by helping neighboring communities meet their needs. There's so much content in this game. It's really, really like vibrant stuff, and everything's not super like color coded, so it's like just for people who can like see well. There's also what's the word, colorblind focused design, so that everything has like a pattern on it, so you can tell it apart from other things. And you'll be trading things like fish and corn and other things that indigenous cultures might be trading at that time period that they're sort of going for the theme. Here's a quote. In many board games, winning is often presented as a zero-sum game where one player's victory comes at the cost of another player's defeat. This is Alexander, the creator of the game. Wolves is about people working together to survive, often referred to as gaduji in the Cherokee language. While you may make choices that benefit you individually, the game's overall theme is that we are all better off when we work as a pack. In those board games where you have to sort of make a decision to either get something just for yourself at a cost or get a bunch of something as long as everybody else gets something. There's a whole lot of that in this game. The Kickstarter campaign will run through August 7th and is aiming to produce a physical box priced at $55 that will ship to backers beginning in March next year, 2024. A broader retail release, including international stock, will roll out after Kickstarter fulfillment is underway. I'm really excited for this game. I've seen a couple of other gift-giving games, but they're all very hyper-competitive. And I love like a feel-good, sit around the campfire, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya kind of board game like this. So I'm really excited for it. I really am hoping that the Kickstarter is going to fulfill all of their stretch goals, that because there's a lot of them as usual with Kickstarter, right? But you're just gonna have to keep an eye out for it, and hopefully it hits retail next year.
That is awesome, especially with Coyote and Crow's all the recent success from them with the Origin Awards and all that. That is fantastic. Unfortunately, though, we have to hop into some slightly sadder news. Noir, would you mind covering this one for us?
Yeah. I hate this news. Dogmite Games is closing shop. Fans of the accessory makers were greeted with an unfortunate message on their website that states, after 10 years of crafting gear for this fantastic community, we are crestfallen to have to close the business. Thank you for your wonderful support over the years. One of my greatest gaming regrets is that I was not able to it was not able to get a GM screen because they made such beautiful stuff. And I just wanted to make sure that we took a moment to say thank you back to Dog Mike. You were responsible for creating masterpieces. You supported the community by supporting different actual play streams. You're responsible for the GM screens seen on Geek and Sundry shows. I know Abria has one as well. It's just, you made fantastic stuff. You're a pillar of the community, and we appreciate everything that you've done in these 10 years. And we hope that somehow, some way, you're able to make a comeback. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And appreciate Noir bringing that to our attention. That is fantastic that we were able to cover this. They have done such great work, like Noir said. And again, thank you for all your time. Next up, we actually do have an update to one of our earlier stories that we covered in the last month. Bonsai, would you like to take this one away for us?
All right, and big thank you to Jeffrey Dome Sanchez for bringing this up from ICV2. Hey, if you guys remember the Lorcana update, guess what? Ravensburg strikes back at the Upper Deck lawsuit. So Ravensburg filed a motion to dismiss the Upper Deck lawsuit against them over the alleged theft of the Upper Deck game by game designer Ryan Miller that contributed to the creation of Disney's Lorcana trading card game. The motion to dismiss was filed in the U.S. Southern District Court of California and dated at July 12th of 2003. So basically just these, like 2 days ago, they were filing. The reasons why they wanted to dismiss the suit is for two different reasons. They claimed that Lorcana was already in development before Ryan Miller joined the project. Also, they also claim that the work subject to the suit happened to be in Washington, and they are suing in California courts, so it doesn't actually apply, and they have to bring it to a Washington court instead. This motion will only be ruled a week after Gen Con, so it'll be before, like, basically you'll get the deck and everything at Gen Con, but everything won't be resolved until afterwards. The attorney representing Ravensburg is Brian Lewis, who had handled legal affairs for WotC in the 90s and early 2000s, so he's super well versed in the law, like basically in respect to tabletop gaming or trading card games and gaming related news. So very interesting to see. And I would love to hear more, like, just like behind the scenes. I know Peter was the one who brought this up in the first place in the news article. Hopefully when he comes back, he can give us more of the details, because I believe Peter also worked with Brian Lewis before as well. So.
Correct. We will. I'm sure we'll be following this story for a little more time to come. When Peter's back, we'll absolutely get his thoughts on that, because we have an expert. Why not use that? Now, I think it's actually time for the diplomacy interview. Any objections to learning more about one of the coolest games at Gen Con?
Absolutely
No,
not.
let's do it.
I want to hear all about it.
Okay, this is a fantastic interview. Once again, thanks to Thomas Haver and Peter Atkinson for sitting down with this interview. We are so excited to play it. Here we go. Enjoy, and we'll see you really soon.
Welcome to TableTakes. Thomas, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's fantastic to be in the presence of a gaming legend here.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you must be talking about Bonsai Baby. Yeah, she's great. She's fantastic. Yeah, we love her. But unfortunately, she won't be joining us for our little part of this program today. It's just going to be us. So you have, you're here to talk about diplomacy because, like, you're like the diplomacy fanatic. Like, you've just done massive amounts of stuff with the game diplomacy, right? Yeah.
Who me? Oh yeah.
But you know, we have a big, broad audience of people that come to Gen Con. I think there might be fair to say there are some people that don't even know what diplomacy is. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is as a game and why it's so important to this hobby?
Certainly. Diplomacy is linked into the gaming hobby and Gen Con itself from the very beginning, being at the very first Gen Con and being advertised in numerous publications over the course of time, whether it's just a casual game or was run as a tournament. And so diplomacy is a game that's set in pre-World War I Europe, where each of the players are role-playing as one of the great powers in Europe, be they England, Germany, France, Austria, Ottoman Turkey, Russia, or Italy. So those players, instead of just simply like rolling dice like you would in Risk, instead negotiate, sometimes in groups of 2 or 3, about what they will do. And then they secretly write down what they are actually going to do, and that gets revealed for everyone. So it is the game of international intrigue. It is the game of treachery, because nothing is holding you to what you say. But it's a game that has inspired a lot of other game designers, like Matt Calkins, designer of Sekigahara, or games, the Game of Thrones board game with some of its mechanics, because it is such an inspirational game that's been around since 1959.
So you referred to it as a role playing game, but I mean, come on, it's not. I mean, there's role playing, but it is a board game. I mean, this game predates Dungeons and Dragons, and probably 99% of the games here at Gen Con, Diplomacy is from back in the 50s? Is it kind of the 50s? Is that right?
Yeah, Alan Collhammer originally developed this while he was a student at Harvard in 1954. He published it by himself in 1959. But a lot of the genesis of this and other war games came from those think tanks at the time that, supported by the Department of Defense. And Alan Collhammer ended up working for one of them, Sylvania, for a number of years, where instead of just simply going through the tactical aspect of it, they were looking at it from a State Department aspect of how do various powers around the world interact with each other when maybe someone is not working in their own, say, best interest or is logical. And so role play is a core component of diplomacy. And I would say that's one of the key differences between people taking the game personally, where you have treachery, and realizing it that you're just role playing as those powers. So I like to take that to an extreme when I'm running the game. Is I have a gigantic map that will be at Gen Con this year. It's 12 foot by 12 foot. I'm going to have my players wear World War I era officer hats, whether you want to have the Pickelhaube of the Germans or you want to dress up as the British Admiral. And of course, I can't have you wear these giant hats without also having, equally giant pieces for you to push around on the board with, say, plotter rods. And
One of
so
those sticks?
Oh, absolutely. We're going to have them pushing on. I've got a couple different varieties here. So that way you get to get in the full experience, and we're going to really play up the role play aspect of it at Gen Con this year.
Okay. I just wanted to set aside any potential confusion, because we have a lot of D&D players and all sorts of role playing game players at Gen Con, and so if you say this is a role playing game, people might be sad. But I get what you're saying. It is a board game, but when you take on in this game, you take on the role of the world leaders of the early 20th century, and it looks like a board game in the sense that you've got a map of Europe, and you've got and you got armies and fleets out there on this map, and you're maneuvering them around. And so, yeah, I think, tell me a little bit about like the history. Like, why did John Peterson write about diplomacy in his book, Playing at the World, which was a book about role playing and the history of role playing and everything that led up to Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, so for those of you who have not purchased the book, it's going to be very difficult to get it, but it is one of the best books written on role playing that you will ever find. And I would say one of the thickest books on role playing you'll ever find, probably like 700 plus pages out there. So, he describes the origination of some of the tactical aspects of wargaming that led into role playing, which it came from a lot of these think tanks at the time, the International Federation of Wargamers, as it made to the wargaming space, where people are looking to simulate, World War II battles over the Civil War, throughout history. One of those that sort of drew inspiration was diplomacy, in that, Alan Collhammer, he got the original idea based upon looking at old maps in his parents' attic that showed what the world looked like, pre-World War I, before we had this great shifting of power. And that inspiration from playing at the world led to, a lot of these war simulations where people, in this case, whether they're military or analysts, will take on the role of these nations. And they would actually go through weeks-long, months-long simulations, whether it be fighting war or strategizing and positioning their powers diplomatically. And that eventually led to a number of games that were released to the public. And wargaming was really, so you could say, sort of say the grandfather of a lot of the modern games that we have. And a lot of those early goers for the conventions were wargamers. That's where they were focused. If you look at the early programs from Gen Con, it was IFW, International Federation of Wargamers, that was there and putting it on. Avalon Hill was there. And of course, diplomacy was there.
I have one of my treasured things, Thomas, is I have the two times that Gen Con made the cover of the General magazine, right? And so I have those covers blown up in my office. Actually, thanks to John Peterson, he's the one that got them for me and did that for me. Yeah, Gen Con, when it started, it was a wargaming convention because that was all there was to the hobby. I mean, there's board games, and diplomacy kind of strides this interesting line between, wargaming, board gaming, role playing game. You're the first person that described it to me as a role playing game, though. But that's it's got that special place. You talked a little bit about how people play the role and issue orders and negotiate. Talk just a little bit about the actual mechanics of the game, because it is a board game.
Yeah. So, when the players are assigned their powers and they're going through and they go through negotiations, say, all right, what are they negotiating about? They're negotiating about what they can do. The game has very simple mechanics, which is, I'd say, one of the reasons why it's got such a stay factor, and that the two units that you have on the board, your armies and your fleets, can only end up doing four things. They can hold in place, they can move to an adjacent territory, they can support an action, or you can convoy an army across a body of water. So just four things. So it doesn't take much to remember those mechanics. However, because no one power is stronger than the other on the board, and there are no random dice rolls in this game, for you to succeed, you need to work with the other players at the board to grow stronger. And you do so at the cost of the other players who you're potentially teaming up against or going back and forth with. So this is how you end up establishing the gameplay of whether you have 2-on-1 or 3-on-2, and it shifts in those alliances. And through those sort of four actual moves, you have the full-on gameplay.
Right. Well, and it gets back also to the simultaneity. You mentioned earlier, like there's all this negotiation. I mean, I've played diplomacy. I'm asking these questions a way to set up you being able to talk about it. But I remember fondly, games and not so fondly some games of diplomacy where, you would have these negotiations and then everybody goes off and writes down their orders. And like you said before, you don't have to do what you said you were going to do. There's lying, there's backstabbing, there's, stuff. You write down what you're going to do and all the orders go in simultaneously. And so because the pieces effectively move simultaneously. So you might say, okay, France and England might agree that the English Channel is going to be off limits, and so the England sends its fleet off to Norway, and the French, no, they send their fleet up into the Gulf of Wales or whatever it is. So
that was one of the sort of like game mechanisms that have made its way throughout gaming, is the simultaneous action selection that you mentioned. Even though the game, can take many hours to play, it doesn't actually feel like it when you're into it, because you're either negotiating with the other players, writing your orders, or adjudicating. And it's not that it's going to be Austria's turn, then it's England's turn, then it's France's turn. It's everyone's turn all the time in the game. So there is no downtime for you. You have to plan in like, hey, at this point in time, we're going to take a bathroom break, because you're going to just roll through straight. There's no time where you're just going to be sitting there wondering, like, what am I going to do? You're going full bore the entire time.
And if you are sitting around wondering, that's because you're getting left out of the key conversations. Yeah. That's a little red flag you should be going off in your head.
Yeah. The timing is a resource in the game. Like whether you're using someone else's time so they can't plan with someone else, or who you plan to talk with in that given period of negotiation.
Yeah. So, but let's be honest here a little bit. Diplomacy does have a bit of a storied side to it, in the sense that people have talked about losing friendships, losing romances in this game. Why do people talk that way about diplomacy, and what should people know before they get into this game?
Yeah, so I think it's infamously called the destroyer of friendships. There's been T-shirts made over that, and I would say that's very common when I teach this at Gen Con. And we have two different event styles at Gen Con. One is the diplomacy tournament, which has been going on for years. We'll talk about that in a bit. But the other style is the introduction to diplomacy, where people are first coming into it. And I really end up having like three groups of people. Those are the folks who have never played before, but they have heard about the reputation of the game and they're curious. Those who have played before, maybe like when they were in their teens, a history teacher taught them and they want to come back to it. And the third group is the people who are roped into playing the game by one of the first two groups.
Right.
And like it does happen because there's no limit placed upon your negotiation. So it is possible that people will lie to you. It's also possible bribery is acceptable. Overhearing someone's conversation is acceptable. You telling them I'm going to do this and you end up doing that. What I try to advise people when they're first learning the game because of this treachery aspect of it is one, like to play up that, you are taking on the role of this power. So if you have to speak negatively or do something negative against a power, like attack them in game, refer to it by the power's name of like, I'm attacking England, I'm attacking Germany. Don't like, I'm not attacking Peter. It's like, Peter's a great player. He's a great person to negotiate with, but Austria's got to go. And so you play up that. The other is to remind people you keep it on the board is when you're going through and playing this game that what you're doing in the game is taking on that role. And so not to take it personally. And I would say that anyone who loses a friend over a board game possibly wasn't your friend to begin with. Quite the opposite, like in this game, is I've established lifelong friendships from it. Like my son's middle name is taken from a friend who I met originally playing a diplomacy game in 2005. And I travel around the world to play diplomacy where I've met new friends, and I've got friends spotted throughout, in Italy and the Netherlands and Philippines who play diplomacy and I get to keep up with. And I wouldn't have that otherwise if not for diplomacy. So I'd say quite the opposite of because you're going through this experience with other people, like it's an intense, like, one-on-one negotiations with others, similar to the one-on-ones you'd have whether you're playing chess or even boxing. You end up establishing a sort of respect for the other players because of the mental energy you have to exert for it. And you end up having friendships that last
Sure.
a lifetime from this game because you have this shared experience.
Yeah. That's right. I have to admit, I never, I've played diplomacy a fair amount, and I'd never heard the idea that you brought up here, which is fresh for me. The idea that let's call it role playing, and that you're role playing, Bismarck or the Sultan or whatever, who these people were. That is, I think that could go a long way to helping people feel like it's less personal that and stuff. So we have a couple minutes left. Let's hear, what are you going to do at Gen Con this year? What can keep people, what can people sign up for or come by and watch?
So when you talk about like what are some of the longest running events of Gen Con, it's sort of like part of the history baked into Gen Con. Diplomacy has been there since the start. And our group similarly has had members where I'm part of a group called Rogue Judges, and everything that we do is rules taught. And members of our group have been going to Gen Con since the 80s. So we have the annual diplomacy tournament. That is something that's been passed down from group to group like a torch of you need to keep this alive. It's important that it occurs. And so what we end up having is 2 qualifying rounds of diplomacy on Thursday, 2 qualifying rounds of diplomacy on Friday. Each one of those qualifying rounds, what your goal is to play a power better than anyone else who plays it in the qualifier. And that's just by pure score. So are you going to be the best Germany out of everyone who's played Germany? And those 7 players will end up competing at the top board on Saturday afternoon. And as a special thing that we do, like we have, of course, giant maps that I mentioned, the hats you can wear. We have a giant wooden board that is only used for 1 game per year, the top board at Gen Con. You've likely, if you're a fan of diplomacy, seen this posted various social media over time because it only comes out for that. And those top 7 players compete until everyone else concedes or there is a solo, aka you get an outright win with 18 supply centers to crown the Gen Con champion as well as the United States champion. So one of the cool things that have been part of diplomacy for a long time is they've hosted an event called DipCon, which is the North American Championships. And at times, Gen Con has hosted it. One of the largest diplomacy tournaments ever was at Gen Con at Lake Geneva in 1977. We also have now the US Championship, and that's courtesy of us working with Hasbro. And I said, like, it's the size of a small child. I'm not kidding. Like, this is a giant plaque. I have to like bring it up from below to show how we have for the US Championship, as well as, for Gen Con itself, we like to do special things like, hey, here's a printing of the map that you can put up in your office or on your mantle at home, as well as, you want to win and be the best England, like a wonderful like pillar plaque where we do that for all of the tournaments. And we go farther than that, like, because we realize it's not just about like the competition. It's good to maintain that tradition, but as I mentioned, we do intro events that are the exact same time as the tournament events, and those oftentimes have more participants than the tournament. Those are both run on Thursday and Friday, where if you don't know diplomacy or just coming in, I will be there to teach you. And like, one, I'm a passionate guy, but also in the new edition of the game, I wrote the quick start rules where I'm encouraging people to play up the role play aspect of the new game.
Right.
So I want to make sure that people's first experience with diplomacy is a happy one. So I always have swag for people. I have games to give away. I'm there to help them through that process. So that way your first time playing is a happy one.
So the big game on Sunday, the big championship with the big board. Do you know what time, and what the location will be? Is it okay for people to just drop by and watch?
We always draw a crowd, because when you bring out something like that big and grand, you always have people that stop by. So the top board at Gen Con will be held 4 p.m. on Saturday in the stadium. So we're at Lucas Oil Stadium. So stop on by to say hi. I will also give a hint that, maybe a few hours in, we tend to have a pizza party as well. So we always order more than is necessary. So maybe if folks are looking for additional snack on there, more than welcome to join us.
It's always good to bribe people to come. I'm big believer in that. So this is going to be on the gridiron then in Lucas in the stadium.
On the gridiron. I don't know if we're going to be on the 50-yard line, but we're going to be close to it. So we'll have another clash of the Titans there.
One of my favorite parts about Gen Con 50, the museum that we did, was that it was the first year that we had the stadium. First year we were on the gridiron, and I said I want it right on the 50-yard line. Of course, come on, it's got to be at the 50-yard line. But wherever you're at, it's going to be great. There's no bad places in Gen Con.
Oh yeah, it's the place everyone goes to for gaming. It is my personal Christmas. Don't tell my family that, but it's my personal Christmas.
I get it. I get it. It's the best 4 days in gaming. Well, thank you, Thomas. I appreciate you coming on the show and telling us about it. And thank you for reaching out. And so give me an excuse. So Saturday, I think I have a dinner at 7, but I should be able to come by and say hi to you on that day. That'd be great.
It'd be great. Come check out the new game, see some of our custom setups on there. We may have something special for you as well.
All right. I'll look forward to it. All right. Thanks again for coming on.
Take care. Have a good one.
And thank you so much, Diplomacy, for joining us. Thomas Haver for joining us earlier for that interview. But we are joined by another wonderful human being, Andrew Gillis from Girl by Moonlight, here to talk about Girl by Moonlight. This is fantastic. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Andrew Gillis. I'm a game designer, longtime role player, former bike mechanic, general enthusiast for role playing characters, all that kind of stuff. Been at it for a while.
Heck yeah. Just off the bat, I just want to compliment the art that you have for Girl by Moonlight. It's just so gorgeous.
Yeah, we had some very lovely artists that we got to work with for the book, and they all 7, 8 of them did wonderful work, and it was very interesting coordinating and giving feedback, and that whole process was really, really fruitful. Very neat.
How involved were you? Were you in charge, or were you just helping out with a pledge manager?
So for all the art, we had an art director, Trivia, and so they were managing everything, but I was in there, providing feedback, providing art briefs, pretty involved in the process, just not necessarily running it.
And is this your first time running a pledge manager?
It's my first time, publishing a book, doing any of this stuff. A lot of firsts for me on Girl by Moonlight.
Well, excellent work from what we can tell so far. Jeez.
You're knocking it out of the park with this. I've got to ask, what inspired you to make an RPG about magical girls?
So back in 2016, 2017, somewhere around there, watched Puella Magica Madoka for the first time and had some inkling of an idea in that moment of like, there's a game in here, and there's a a relationship that I have to the genre that I wanted to explore more. And so given that the game that I wanted to play inspired by that, didn't exist, I had to go make it basically.
That is fantastic. I have I love the shout out of the anime there too, but this game kind of is everything I wanted from an RPG like this. Just look what I'm able to see from it. This is probably my most anticipated and excited game to actually get in my hands and play. So yeah, super pumped for that.
Mhm.
I guess one of my questions is like with the whole magical girls genre RPG placement, is there in plans for a soundtrack to be played while you are playing the RPG? Because I feel like those do go hand in hand if you really want the full experience.
They do go well together. Yeah. I mean, certainly I've got to shout out an artist by the name of Katie Day as being like a hugely important artist for me while I was working on the game and just kind of personally in general. So I feel like if you want the official Andrew playlist, it probably is going to feature her really heavily. But there's a huge range within the game. It's got like 4 different kind of sub games inside of it, and each one kind of does need its own musical treatment at the end of the day. So it would be difficult for me to give just a straightforward answer on that one, unfortunately.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
I am a big fan of Evil Hat's games. Monster of the Week is probably my favorite RPG system. What was it like getting involved in Evil Hat and getting them to like sort of help make this game come to life?
Yeah, so it's really funny how that came together, which is that I was running the game, like an early playtest version of the game at a convention called Go Play Northwest. And I had a wonderful table there, and I managed to drag John Harper, my friend Violet, my newly acquainted friend Andy into this playtest, and we were playing the game. And then Sean Nittner, who's kind of one of the 2 main folks at Evil Hat, came through and just like asked if he could watch us play the game or whatever and check it out. And so when I got home from that trip, I got an email that was basically an offer to publish the game from them.
Whoa.
Which is very
real
cool.
That's
cool.
amazing.
I was just like in the break room at work and kind of had this mode of like, I am a little bit overwhelmed. I don't really know what to do with this. But from there, they were gracious enough to just let me develop the game myself and do what I wanted to do with it. And there was a lot of trust there that they were just like, yeah, make the game that you want to make. And then we'll make a book out of it once it's done. And so I came to them with a completed game. The whole system, everything was fully developed. And then from there, we went about, writing the rule book, getting the art, all those kind of steps that let you actually have a physical thing that people can hold.
Speaking of developing the game yourself, I'm curious, what was the hardest aspect of translating from the magical girl genre into game design? Like these characters can do so much. What was the really difficult part of getting it down?
Yeah, I think there's a tension around like keeping the game grounded, not letting it just be like superhero fiction. There's a difference there that was really important to highlight. And also the kind of emphasis on emotional action, right? That there is the space of play needed to feature characters' emotions, the way they feel about things, the things they believe in or hope for, whether or not, like that they will experience heartbreak, and that will be equivalent to like a really bad injury or whatever, right? To kind of create this game in which those things can be held at equal weight, when so often action as we imagine it is, sword fighting or jumping over stuff. There's like a very particular category of things that is typically held for action, quote unquote, in the game.
And that emotional aspect is very key to the genre itself too. My question, because you mentioned there's 4 series play sets. The one that I am personally excited for is A Maze of Dreams, which is based off Paprika and Serial Experiments, 2 projects that I have a weird obsession with. What of these we do? This I'm taking Bonsai's question actually. Bonsai usually asks, "What's your favorite child?" But I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite of these playbooks? It doesn't have to be that any of them are bad necessarily, but what is your personal favorite if you have one?
Yeah, there's a funny story with how these all came about, because initially there wasn't the plan to have 4 of them, and the game really was grounded almost entirely in what became later Beneath a Rotting Sky. And my working title for it, once I did start to split out, that one was the bad one, and then there was the good one, which is At the Brink of the Abyss now. And those two kind of formed the core of the game. Making sure that it hit those two targets was really kind of my strongest initial understanding of what I needed. And then at that point, having built a framework to develop them, it was easy enough to build two more. But I think my favorite is still, the bad one. I just have a little sweet spot in my heart for that. And it's the kind of play that I lean into a lot, of like having my characters really not have their own best interest at heart, and to put them on big tragic arcs and have horrible blow-ups that happen, or very complicated outcomes. That's just something that I always really, really enjoy. So
That's
I
amazing.
love that. That's
Such a good answer.
amazing. Can I ask, for people who maybe aren't as familiar as we've become with it, can you tell us what's different about Girl by Moonlight?
Oh gosh. So I think one thing from a design perspective, the really important stuff for me was that it's a modular game, right? So there are these 4 different series play sets, and those let you develop 4 different kinds of stories within the same kind of game system. And that was a big challenge to design, and something that I'm pretty proud of the output that I made there. And also that it's a structured game. And so there is a whole system within it that's about helping you pace out your story, in the broad strokes, but also like moment to moment. It's always clear what needs to happen next and what you need to be doing as players, which for me, at least, I always find very comforting in a game. I like to know, yeah, this is the thing we're doing, and we can all focus on doing that. The group doesn't explode in a million directions with a bunch of different contradictory or ideas that can't collaborate or be working together. The other, I think, really important thing that the game does through that structure is that it's a game about a team, and that the characters, the protagonists, are all necessarily going to be interreliant and interconnected in a bunch of really important ways. And so it allows you to have a lot of fun setting up your friends, who are playing a character as well, playing into each other's stories, and always kind of complementing each other's actions and working together to tell a story, rather than having like, this is my character and this is their arc. It's always about like, here's my character's arc and how it interacts with all the other arcs of all the other characters, and our kind of team, and what our team is about.
That's fantastic, because I've played. I mean, I love this concept. I've played versions of this where I've had friends try to smash other RPGs or make something out of something else that to kind of fit this. And that was always an actual problem we had, where unless the players were actively collaborating, trying to connect our stories together, we were missing that aspect. So we could kind of play in a flavored world, but we couldn't actually get the feel of what it's like to be these young girls in this situation. So that makes me even more excited to see this game.
Really quickly, can I just ask, like, what would you say to someone that is not particularly well involved in the magical girl genre about playing this game?
Yeah, so like, I'm taking a genre, and then, as any work that makes use of a genre does, right? It's a personal thing for me, right? It's my take on the genre, or my kind of relationship to it that I'm expressing through the game. And so even if you're not familiar with the genre, you might still be interested in some of the other themes that the game has going on around like queer and kind of trans journeys of self-discovery, which are a big part of it. And those ideas of like working together, forming community, facing off against, like in the real world, we have like structural or systemic problems that we might be struggling with. And the idea in Girl by Moonlight is that those problems are represented in the mundane world as we would, recognize them, but also that metaphors or symbols for them exist in this magical kind of arena that we then can fight and overcome, or redeem or transform. And so I think there's a lot of different lines in for people who, even if they're not super into magical girl stuff, they're going to find things to like about the game. And the last one I'll plug as well is that this is a Forged in the Dark game. So if you're familiar with Blades in the Dark and other games in its lineage, it does a bunch of really cool stuff with that format. And so if you're familiar with that and just want to see some interesting game design stuff, that's happening here too. And there's a lot that's worth digging into for players kind of coming from that angle.
So along that line, then, would you say that all people would need to play this game would be the similar materials as like a Blades in the Dark game, where it's just some dice and maybe a playbook and then something to write with?
Yeah, basically, you print out the sheets. You have a couple of six-sided dice. Maybe have the game manual on hand, especially if you're newer. But I've tried to do a good job of giving people a grounding and explaining everything well in the rulebook. You can let me know how well I've done, and that you should be able to just pick up and play the game. And even if there is that learning curve of figuring out the game, how you want to play it, what your kind of spin on it is going to be, that there's enough there to support you in going on that journey. And as you learn, the game is going to sing more clearly, and everything's going to kind of gel and work together over time.
I do have a question. Oh, Bonza, you can go ahead if you want.
Oh, no. If you already had one, I don't want to step on toes. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. I was, we were just so excited to talk about Girl by Moonlight. Sorry. So I wanted to actually ask you a little bit more information about Zine by Moonlight. Now, Zine by Moonlight, from what I know, it's a bunch of really talented artists and writers coming together to make little story zines or maybe inspiration settings or something like that for would you mind continue? I don't know enough, apparently.
Yeah, so this was my idea for how we were going to manage all of our stretch goal material for the backer kit campaign that we ran. And so it's to kind of collect everything in this zine by Moonlight. And it was, short essays, like personal essays, short fiction, visual art, play advice, all this kind of stuff, all within this one format of a zine, just because it was very easy to keep adding stuff on as we needed to, right? It was extensible, so it could accommodate a lot of different kinds of stuff and a different amount of stuff, but we did end up hitting all those stretch goals. So there's a ton of material in there. And it's, like you say, a lot of very talented people bringing in, their take on the magical girl genre, the impacts that had in their life, or the connections that they're making between their own identities and the kinds of stuff that they see in the genre, stuff like that. So it's a very nice little companion piece to the game. You don't strictly need it, but if you're looking for inspiration or more ideas, or want to have like a broader understanding of how the genre operates or how it might intersect with like race or other identities, it's all in there. Because I'm just one person, I can't cover all that ground. So we brought in a lot of extra folks to pad things out.
We love zines here, so fully on board with this. We are a zine show through and through.
I guess my question would be, for a lot of this is, would you say that for the gameplay, it was very important for you to make this like a narrative first kind of game? Because you are using like the Blades in the Dark kind of system, which is, I believe, like more narrative, like fail forward kind of system, if I would like to say. What were your thoughts about that?
I mean, it's in part, it's just kind of what was the best tools I had at hand. Right as I was starting to work on the game, there was an early prototype of it that was a Powered by the Apocalypse game that didn't last very long. I think there was one playtest that I did of it, and I scrapped the whole thing because once I saw how Blades worked and what it was doing, I kind of became familiar with it. I was like, oh, this is doing a lot of things that I want, and there's a really clear kind of translation that I can make between it and the game that I have in my head. But in terms of like the kinds of games that I play and the stuff that I'm excited about, it's very much in that like indie RPG space that I am most at home. And so it felt, very appropriate to work in that space and to contribute something new to it.
Throughout the playtesting of this game, do you have any moments that stood out to you as like really cool things you wouldn't have seen in a different RPG system?
Oh.
Yeah. So there was a lot of stuff that kind of emerged where I had like an inkling of how it might, the kinds of play that it might result in, or things like that. That's one of the kind of magics of the hobby, is that people take whatever you put in front of them and they're going to spin something out of it, and they're going to interpret it in a particular way, or find some unexpected use for a tool that you put in their hands. I think probably the coolest moment from playtesting, which ended up really changing my perspective on the game, was my friend Nadja just very off the cuff saying like, oh yeah, and in season 1, my character was with the baddies, but now I'm on the the good team or whatever. And she spoke into existence this idea of like, this was not the first season of the fictional show that we were making. This was season 2, and there's a whole other season behind us that is kind of loosely defined, but that we can pull elements from, or say like, oh yeah, actually we figured this out in season 1. Here's what that was, right? It's like there's this principle in Blades in the Dark of you cut to the action when you're doing a score, which means you kind of start in the middle. And this ended up becoming this idea of you start in season 2. It's just that same principle, but applied to like the whole story of the game. Where yeah, there's some history behind us that we're leaving undefined so that we can cement it as we need it. We can flash back to it to establish details that we want or need for our ongoing story. And that was like a huge galaxy brain moment born of my friend Naja just having a really good idea kind of off the cuff, just based on like the presentation of the game as being, this language of like a series or whatever, right, that I was pulling from television. She leaned into that even further and gave me this incredible tool for explaining how to like play role-playing games really well, right?
That's awesome.
That's so cool.
So one of the questions I love to ask designers is, when did you know the game was done? And do you have plans for your next project?
Ooh.
Yeah, so I was very lucky in that I did have a pretty clear idea of what I wanted the game to look like. Ultimately, I had a couple of key kind of notes that I wanted to hit. And so once I had done that, I only got a little bit carried away by making the whole series playset thing, only made 4 games instead of 1 or maybe 2. And then I was like, cool, I'm done and I'm good. And that was around like 2018 that I was like, this game is pretty much locked in. And it was very nice to have that clarity about it, because I know that sometimes these projects can drag on. And then, yeah, I've got like 3-ish other projects that I'm kind of lining up in the future. Some I can't talk about and some that I can, but yeah, I'm always thinking about the next thing, and you end up with these ideas or these fragments of like mechanics or whatever else, where it's like, oh yeah, that doesn't fit in Girl by Moonlight, but maybe in the future I want to try doing something with, a big thing I'm interested in is like prose as a unit of play. And so I have this idea for a game where you're like, a big part of how you play it is that you write out this whole paragraph of prose, and then over the course of the game you like cross out parts of it or redact parts of it, and that there's this like unraveling effect that occurs. And that, that idea is its own little game, and I'm going to spin that out. But I started thinking about these things, and you can see some hints of it in how some of the character abilities and stuff work in Girl by Moonlight, where you have a list of things that you can't do, and there's the one that you get to do, and you cross that out. When you're the guardian, you have a code, right? And there's a set of restrictions, one of which you eliminate, stuff like that.
Well, for now, folks in Twitch chat, if you want to check out the link that we posted, you can. The crowdfunding campaign is over. It's been fully funded. Congratulations again. But you can still pre-order it. So go ahead and check out that link in chat.
And I believe if those of you pre-order using that link in chat, you will be able to get the same fulfillment with the same shipment with the people who initially crowdfunded it, which is really, really awesome. But that is our show today, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining us here. We are going to go a quick rundown of what we have coming this week before we take our break before game night. Speaking of, at 3:30, we have TableTakes game night, where Bonsai will be taking through us a game called Definitely Wizards, so stick around for that. And then at 5 p.m., we have some joyful gaming around Sarah's Table, which Sarah Moore plays with some friends. I believe this is Sleepaway Part 2, so if you missed last week's, check out the VOD or just have a good time being confused. And then on Monday, we have Board Games with the Brothers Murph at 4 p.m. and then at 6 p.m., followed by Dress to Quest. Wednesdays, we have Path of the Brush. Thursdays, we have Blood on the Clock Tower at 10 a.m. And 4 p.m., we have Roll with Rem Alternus. And then we are right back here for TableTakes, Game Night, and Sarah's Table all over again. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you to the hosts. Thank you to Andrew, who was so kind to join us to talk about a game that I am literally like so excited to play. If you miss any of our programming here, you can check out the VODs on Twitch or YouTube 24 hours later, and make sure you follow GCTV for the best 4 days of gaming all year long. See ya.
Bye.